doing our beers in the back. We had our January WASDE, our D1 stocks, our winter wheat acres. Got a lot of data from the USDA today, and not going to say never because we got a lot of years of experience on this call here. But it's been a long time since we had seen a report that was as universally bearish as maybe this one was. Looking through all the numbers on our sheet that we sent out here, the only thing that I could find that was below trade expectations was Brazilian corn production. And I believe that was still a record crop, just not quite as big a record as the trade was looking for. So I had one of these reports that just lined up bearish, bearish, bearish. So good day if you're a commodity buyer, which we have a lot of those that we talk to. So let's get into it. Where do you start, guys? You want to start with stocks?
Just as well, yeah. These one stocks.
Corn stocks, just under 13.3 billion bushels. The trade was looking for something about a little over 300 million bushels less than that, just below 13 billion bushels. Is that probably part of the reason those big stocks, why they felt like they needed to go up on yield, or are those two things mutually exclusive, Bill?
Goes the other way. They forecast the crop, and that was up 500 million bushels, 270 million bushels from the previous one, and that led to basically a justification for the larger feed and residual. They raised feed and residual, and so there's been a lot of hand wringing about that big feed and residual, and this pretty much justifies that USDA should be not only over 6 billion, but at the 6.2 billion they put in there. So a lot of stocks, bigger crop, and a lot of stocks to start. So we are going to have a lot of a grain to work with going through the summer and fall. It's going to make the market a little bit less jumpy, I think.
Yeah, I guess, and on beans, I got a few more beans there, about 40 million bushels more soybeans than we thought we ought to have in the pile. That's good news. I kind of thought some of the risk going into this report was if we were to find a smaller bean number, a smaller bean crop, that maybe would put a little bit of pressure, because I think a couple things in my mind in the last 30 to 60 days have changed. One of those, I think you and I were pretty much in agreement that the Chinese were not going to be able to take the 12 million metric tons of beans they promised to take from us this crop year. Today, it looks like they're well on the way to getting those bought anyway. So I think that's a little bit of a delta in my mind on the USDA's export number, although it was still too high, and we knew felt like they were going to take it down, which they did. But the amount that it would have to go down was less than I guess I would have thought before the Chinese stepped in and started buying. And then a couple Fridays ago, we had that really low oil yield, which tells us that the USDA's oil yield for the year might be 0.2 of a bushel too high. I noticed they took that from 11.8 down to 11.65. We'll get to that. But to me, the prospects of bigger crush because of lower oil yield and a bigger export number meant, gee golly whiz, I hope we don't have a big slip up and find out that the bean crop's a good bit smaller than we thought. Well, boy, howdy, we didn't have to worry about that today, did we? Plenty of stocks and looks like a plenty big bean crop. So,
yeah, stocks were, the crop was raised from its previous by 9 million bushels, but the stocks ended up 40 million bushels larger. So we actually had less residual. That looked a little bit out of line, maybe, but it is what it is, and we're going to have to live with that going forward. That we have bigger supplies, and that's why the bean and meal markets are taking it on the chin today, I guess.
Now, bean yield was flat at 53, right, with where it was before. It was just we found acres. Scott and I were joking. It's like we found bean acres, we found corn acres. Somewhere there has to be a negative here, I would think. But
no. Let me push back on that. The corn acres planted were about unchanged, but the harvested percent went up. So we had
Oh,
a
harvested,
very,
yes. Yep.
we had a very open fall, and that's
Is that
led to 92.4% being harvested, and I think that's about as high as we've been in at least a decade in that. So we took the harvested up significantly.
Oh, yeah.
It was Nebraska, the Dakota. It was mostly the Western Corn Belt where we got a more harvested acres out of this, and that's always kind of an unknown. Usually, it works potentially as a risk of smaller crops. When you have a wet fall, you don't know how much you really lost. This time, we got through it pretty good. So those $500,000 combines are helping lead to a higher percent harvested, I suppose.
I don't
So-
think you can touch a combine for $500,000, can you, Nate?
I don't think, well, you can find a good used one probably.
Okay.
Maybe, probably quite used, but
So just, I mean,
Well-
looking at this, not to get off the topic, but everything was down. You know, you look at the screen, we got beans are down 14 cents. We got meal off $5. We got corn down 20 some cents. Oil started out, was up almost a penny before the report, backed off. We ended the day up a half a cent, but energy really isn't doing much today. So what is oil looking at?
I think if you averaged late last week energy together with what oil did today, it makes more sense. I mean, remember was it Thursday or Friday? We were looking at the screen and going, geez, diesel fuel's up 8 cents. Why is bean oil sitting here on its backside when it should be up about a penny? So for whatever reason, there seemed to be a days or a trading session lag in there. But I think if you look at the end of last week and today combined, that part of it maybe makes a bit more sense. Because I was wondering that too. Well, energy's not doing anything. Why do we need to be up a penny on bean oil? But that was the Friday effect, I think, is what that was. That wheat stocks number looked to be a good bit bigger as well.
Yes, that was almost 40 million bushels larger than the trade guess. A lot of that was in hard red wheat. So USDA felt compelled to lower their feed and residual estimate from 120 down to 100. And I've been using a much larger one, and this one probably makes me raise the white flag and say USDA is going to be right at that low feed and residual number. It was just throwing more bearish news on the market to get that big feed and residual or big stocks number leading to a lower feed and residual for wheat. It was pretty impressive there too.
What are you carrying on your exports right now, Bill?
925. So I'm above USDA.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they didn't go higher.
I'm a little surprised there, but then when you see that feed, you would have thought they would have kind of washed out. We've got 4 months to go. Pace would still tell you that we're ahead of where we were a year ago by 20 to 25% on inspections. Do you think we still have a chance to raise that before we get to the end of the year?
Oh yeah. I think they're at 900 now. You could go plus or minus 25 million from that pretty easily to take it. That's probably not the bullish factors that we have in front of us. It's probably something having to do with dryness in the southern plains. That will be we can turn the page now and talk about the 3 things ahead of us that we have to worry about. But this was pretty monumental in giving us more supplies and more runway going into the summer.
Right. And I guess that might be a decent segue on into acres. And
Sure.
I honestly was a little surprised by the acres that came out. We came in at a nice, smooth 33 million acres. That was above trade guesses by, call it 500,000, maybe 600,000 is what the trade guesses were. We actually, if you look at where we were on hard wheat alone, that's where your big move was at. Not quite 500,000 extra acres of hard wheat from trade guesses. Soft wheat was also a little higher, but not by as much. And again, looking at the trade guesses, we lost ground on white wheat. Dave was asking before we got started here, where were the big moves? Talking to people that I know in the industry, we were expecting bigger drops in soft red, especially in Illinois, because they had such a dry fall. Turns out Illinois was only down 6%, 50 million acres. Also, Kentucky, we heard, and Indiana were supposed to be down. Kentucky was down 8, but again, not as many acres at all in Kentucky. Went down 40,000. And Indiana was unchanged. So, some of the other big ones, I guess, Montana was down 15%. Oklahoma was up 15%. Texas up about 2%. So we just had seems like a lot of pluses and minuses. We were just at a conference, Nate and I and Paige and Calvin were at a conference this past week in Kansas City, the Van Trump FarmCon. Guy there was talking that overall acres might be down by as much as 25%. That seemed like a big number then, and certainly seems like a big number right now.
Yeah, did you get his email address, Scott? You want to send him an email and tell him how wrong he was?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, soft red winter wheat acres, unless our sheet's wrong here, that almost looks like identical to last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unchanged from last year, more than what the trade was looking for on the trade guesses.
Well, if it's the same as last year, and you said Illinois is down 6, Kentucky's down 8, and Indiana's unchanged, where did we pick up soft red winter wheat acres?
Well, again, it's
North Carolina, 11%.
Yeah, dribs and
Ohio,
drabs.
Ohio, 12%.
North Carolina, Michigan, just a little bit here and there, Dave. I mean, again, Ohio, 70 there. So again, it was a bit of a surprise. But back to what Bill kind of alluded to before, the next thing, I guess, now we can move along. We got acres. Now we need to worry about the spring. How do we get through the rest of winter here and dormancy? And what does the spring look like? The spring is always the most important part of the growing season anyway. So that's where our focus is automatically going to shift to right now.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking South American weather now comes into greater fore. Winter wheat dryness, although a transition out of La Nina is probably not bullish. That's going to bring us more southern plains precip potentially, but that's the other thing. And then we'll get into the 26-27 growing season. We'll have a USDA Outlook conference. Will give us those splash numbers, and I don't know where they can go from how much they can tighten down the stocks. And I think the thing that I guess surprised me was on these smaller acreages for wheat was wondering, what are they going to plant if they don't plant wheat? Is it just going to be throwing the towel in it? And wheat's a low input crop, so it's one you can get into. And we had an open fall to get that in. I didn't buy into that story, although there are a lot of people out there that track this a lot more closely than I do, that have a lot more on ground truth on this. But it just seemed a little bit amazing that we'd have overall big drops in wheat acres, given the opportunity to plant it and the fact that it's a low input crop.
Well, these people that you say watch it a lot closer than you were a lot less right than you were. So
even maybe sometimes no one squirrel finds a needle in a haystack once in a blue moon.
Yeah, or something like that. That might be my new favorite mixed metaphor. As far as ending stocks, I mean, when you back up and you look at it across the board, we kind of have enough of everything. 350 million bushels of beans, that's kind of Goldilocks. Didn't do the math. That's got to be 8 point something, 8.25%, 8.5% of use. soybean endings or corn ending stocks approaching just under 2.25 billion bushels. That's probably a few more than a
13,
Goldilocks forecast.
13.6.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that gives
Yeah.
us, if you just look at corn, that's versus the trade thinking, well, we're going to get to $4.50 in the futures with a 1.9 carryout. Well, we got 300 million bushels more now, and that's equal to, you know, what, at least 4 bushels per acre leeway. The idea that we can't produce these high yields over 185 is now kind of dispelled, I guess, for lack of a better word. That okay, we can. That's not just a long shot that we can do that. So pretty favorable for a flatter market and prices looking for something to trade.
Yeah. Yeah, we've heard the argument, you know, quite a few times in my career of, oh, you know, yields are flattening out, they're plateauing, we're kind of running out of, you know, how far we can push the genetics and the farming practices and all that stuff. And my experience has been is that about the time that conversation gets a little bit of momentum to it, Mother Nature says, "Here, hold my beer and watch this." Seems to be maybe what we have seen this time yet again. So, yeah, I think it's kind of one of those times in which honestly is more the norm than the exception. Unfortunately, it just hasn't been the norm for a while. Seems like we've been dealing with one damn thing after another, whether it's the war in in Russia and the Ukraine, or COVID, or some crop issues somewhere in the world for the last 4 or 5 years. But you know what? Last year and this year, kind of getting back to what I think is the historical norm, and that is, you know, when Mother Nature doesn't throw you a weather-related production issue somewhere in the world at a major growing area, you kind of are at a spot where we kind of have enough of everything, and that's where we are right now. I mean, those are very much Goldilocks forecasts. 925 million bushels of wheat as an ending stocks number. That's kind of just right, isn't it? Maybe on the heavy side of just right.
I would say on the heavy side, you're 45%, 45.5 stocks to use. We kind of have enough.
Yep.
Even with a reduction in beginning supplies of soybean oil from a lower yield, that we took that down 225 million pounds. We still ended up with larger ending stocks. We just aren't going to use as much for biofuel. It does appear from the USDA's analysis. So we got market maybe up today, maybe just sell meal and buy oil, or you know, I don't know what it is, but we got pretty ample supplies of soybean oil too.
Yeah, and I think history tells us, and you know, Bill, you've kind of pointed this out in the past, as have others, that you know, if you have enough beans, if you're crushing for oil, and you have enough crush capacity, which we certainly have, and you have enough beans, which now it appears we certainly do, you're probably going to have enough oil. And that's, I think, the message. That's why I guess I thought coming into this report, to me, the big watch out was what if we find out we have a good bit smaller bean crop than we think we have? Well, that would have been potentially a problem, because then you get to the spot where maybe you don't have enough beans. Well, I would say disaster averted. And I think if you're an oil buyer, and we have a lot of those that we deal with, I think the three big things on your risk radar screen was this report, for the reasons I just pointed out. Well, we got past that hurdle okay. The next one, I think very clearly the elephant in the room is the biofuel policy announcement. Still hearing that could be sometime, hopefully in the next 3 to 6 weeks. God knows you don't hear much out of that, but that's the next big shoe to drop. And really always this time of the year, as you pointed out, Bill, is South American weather. You know, but so far that's been pretty fancy. I think that's been pretty decent. You know, I mentioned at the beginning of this that the only thing, if you're looking across all the numbers, that I could point out that was less than you expected was that the USDA was at 131 million metric tons of Brazilian corn production last month. The trade expected to go up 2 million metric tons because of the better weather. and they stayed where they were at the 131. That is as close as I can give you as something that if there's one number that was below expectations on today's report, that's it. And like I said, that's still a record corn crop, I think, for Brazil. So I suppose that's all we've got for you. Anything else we need to hit on today that we haven't touched on, folks?
Nothing here.
All right. Well, there you go. If anybody has any questions, you got our number. Give us a call, shoot us a note. And outside of that, be careful out there.
Sounds good. See ya.
See ya.